I'm inviting Jonathan Covey to come up and introduce our panel along with, I believe he's here already, the Texas 10 Commandments Law panel, keynote panel first for the day, David Barton and Jonathan Covey, to introduce the panel.
Okay, guys, we've got a panel. We're going to cover particularly what's happening in surrounding states with 10 Commandments. It's really the first serious effort to get the 10 Commandments back in school since the court said no back in 1980. So there's been a period of 45 years. 10 Commandments been out after having been in schools for 270 years. They've been out for 45. So all of the folks you see on the stage here, and Jonathan Covey, you guys will know from Public Policy Director for Texas Values. Then Gene Mills, who Louisiana Family Forum. Louisiana was the first state to make the modern attempt to get back, and then Candy Noble here in Texas, and Candy was a chief sponsor this time. So, Gene, since you guys were kind of the first ones to come back with it, kind of set up the stage. What brought you to that point? Why? Where are you? What's going on in Louisiana with the 10 Commandments?
Well, thank you, David, and thank you, Texas Values, for all you're doing for this state and for our nation. It's making an impact. As far as Louisiana's concerned, we had one state lawmaker, Dodie Horton, who really felt compelled 2 years ago or 3 years ago to pass the national motto and have it posted in classrooms. And of course, they tasked us with the delivery process. So the In God We Trust was kind of a precursor. And once it was passed and sailed through the process with bipartisan support.
And by the way, Louisiana, how many parishes, how many schools?
64 parishes.
64 parishes, which are kind of our counties. And so about how many kids, classrooms?
We've got about 900,000 kids in public education. That's not counting the homeschoolers and the private and parochial. So it's about 1 million kids inside of that zone that are impacted by that. They went up immediately. And of course, the law went into effect. And in this case, the departments, the head of the school system, Cade Brumley. If you don't know Dr. Cade Brumley from Louisiana, he was a hair's breadth from being Trump's choice to head the education establishment in D.C. And he's done an extraordinary job bringing principled ideas to the state of Louisiana that are really reforming education, trying to get back to a classical model and calling for standards in reading, writing, and arithmetic, and athletics, and some of the silliness like DEI and other. He shares our values, can I say it that way? It's one thing when you got a good decision maker. It's another thing when you have a good decision maker who's motivated by the same principles that we are, and Kate is. So in God We Trust, he slapped a letter on top of our posters and akin with the Attorney General's letter that says, you shall comply. And that went up immediately. We delivered them throughout the states. So Dodie Horton came back the following year and said, let's do it with the 10 Commandments. I said, Dodie, I'm tired of driving across the strait. You got me screaming all over the Louisiana. She said, we're going to do it anyway. And we did. It passed with a bipartisan support. WallBuilders came and testified. We had others. Our hearing didn't go until 5 o'clock in the morning. But you need to know Louisiana can be just as transactional as Texas is, just a little smaller. Of course, they sent me here to say that we believe that Texas might have been part of the original Louisiana Purchase.
No, I was going to say Louisiana was part of East Texas. You've always been part of East Texas.
Hey.
You guys are deep East Texas.
All I can say is go Tigers. But back to the 10 Commandments. So the governor called me as soon as the bill passed. He's a good friend. He's a fellow believer. He shares our values. And he said, okay, Gene, we got to get them up. We got to get these posters up all over the state of Louisiana. I said, Governor, don't you think we ought to wait until the litigation comes down? No, make us take it down. So we started the process. We designed posters that were commensurate with what the Attorney General felt she could defend. It's not the most beautiful poster. It's a little more complicated than Texas version. And we began the process of delivering them. So far, we've delivered about 95% of the school systems in the state of Louisiana.
That's great. That's great.
Now, the litigation is still the elephant in the room. Some are holding on to those because they cannot destroy them. Cade Brumley, the district superintendent for all the schools, is the named defendant or the named person in the lawsuit, so he could not give the directive. He felt like he needed to take a neutral position, that we needed to push it. So the posters are printed and delivered. Now, we include colleges, which is a little more onerous and a lot more difficult. That has not begun yet. We're waiting on the Fifth Circuit. We've petitioned. Our lawsuit has gone before a 3-judge panel of the Fifth Circuit. It was not a favorable ruling. We're pending a full circuit hearing. If that is not granted, we will go straight to the Supreme Court. That's basically where we are. Cool.
So you guys did it last year. Texas tried it our last session. We did not get it done. Brought it back this time. Candy Noble and Candy, I think you guys know who Candy is. North Texas representative, Collin County area. This is, I think, Candy, your 4th term in the House, I think. So Candy, she sponsored this time. And so Candy, take us through the passage of the 10 Commandments bill here in Texas.
Well, it was quite the journey. And David, I wanted to start out by just thanking you for your work that you've done on our founding fathers and why the 10 Commandments are such an important part of our nation's history, both educationally and historically, judicially. And so we had a very firm foundation based on your work and other people's work to be able to make a great case for it. It was laid out in committee or in the early morning hours. I've never had to be that cognizant, and so grateful for you guys for coming in and testifying in the middle of the night. Well, actually, it was early morning. We finally finished about 6:15 a.m., laying it out in committee. And we, you know what? It was amazing. Early in session, I went to the speaker and told him this was my priority bill for the session. And he said, we're going to get it done. And we absolutely did get it done. So proud of the work that we did. The debate on the House floor was about 4.5 hours total, and we covered a lot of Founding Fathers information, and I'm just so proud to have been part of that. Returning the 10 Commandments to our classrooms where they belonged for centuries of our forefathers, and they understood very well the relevance that the 10 Commandments have in our daily lives and how we need to respect authority and respect others, and to not kill, not steal, to keep our word in families. That's the way I explain adultery to children. And thank you so much for taking leadership and helping me to be able to be very well informed for that debate.
Well, you got it piloted across the line, and so now that's a big impact on Texas. Last session didn't work as well. What was the difference between this session and last session?
Well, we didn't have the finished bill early enough. Last session was the main thing. We kept tweaking it and working on it. It went through the Senate, finally made it through the Senate, but it just ran out of time in the Texas House. Frankly, we had a lot of heavy lifts right at the end of session, and that one, unfortunately, wasn't one of the ones that we were able to get across the finish line. This session, we were able to come in with it finished from the start. It went through the Senate very quickly. So grateful to Phil King and his leadership and getting it through the Senate so quickly. And by the way, I did have bipartisan support in the Texas House as well. I'm so proud of those that stood up and said, you know what, it's time to restore to our classrooms that are filled with mayhem right now, the things that are important to us as a society, to make sure that our kiddos know how to treat others. And so that is just getting it off the finish, getting it out the door much quicker. This session made the difference.
Gene, you mentioned it was bipartisan, the vote in Louisiana. Candy, what was the vote here in Texas? Was it bipartisan?
It was mostly along the lines, but I did have some Democrats vote with me on it. And I had others that frankly told me secretly that they supported it, but they couldn't vote for it on the House floor because they thought it was the right thing to do. And so I think universally people are more excited about it than the naysayers, and that when they know our history of the Americas, they understand how foundational the 10 Commandments are to us as a society.
Yeah. So both states passed it. Jonathan, where are we legally?
Yeah, absolutely, and thank you, David, for being up here and doing all this as well. I want to mention Senator Phil King as well. I'm sorry he couldn't be here, but so grateful for his leadership as well as Representative Candy Noble's leadership on this. It's just incredible. Here in Texas, we had a lawsuit filed by a group of parents against Alamo Heights School District and a number of others, actually 10 other school districts. And it went to the Western District here in Texas in the federal court, and there was an injunction placed upon those for those school districts. They were suing, saying basically this is a coercion. It's the classic coercion argument. That this is coercing kids into into what they called observance or veneration of religious scripture, and of course we know that's not true. It's like. You walk through public schools and you see all the time, climate posters, you see military posters. I mean, it was like, I don't go into the month of June and see a Pride Month poster and say, oh, okay, I guess I am coerced now. I got to go out and buy a pair of rainbow socks. It's just, there's no coercion there. It's a passive display that's taking place. But here in the state of Texas, of course, we have some of the federal district judges that don't see it that way. There was an injunction placed on those 11 school districts, and they're not required currently while the litigation is going on to display those. But for the rest of the state of Texas right now, and the Attorney General has put out a memo and has made clear, if they have posters donated, they need to display those. The law is still in effect for all the other over 1,100 school districts in the state of Texas. We also had another recent case that was filed just, I guess it was last week, the Cribbs-Ringer case, which I think is going to be sort of consolidated with the current Alamo Heights case, and that's 14 other school districts. So we see some parents, the ACLU, Freedom from Religion Foundation, those folks trying to sort of close off our avenues here in Texas, but ultimately most of the school districts in the state of Texas still have the ability and even have the duty to put those posters up. And like you talked about earlier, we're going to wait for, there's an interlocutory appeal to the Fifth Circuit going on right now. We're going to wait to see what the Fifth Circuit does on the full panel level.
Just kind of explaining on some of this stuff as well, is the reason these things are going on now the way they are is, and just even bigger picture. So in the state of Texas, we've got a lot of federal judges. This complaint was not filed in the DFW area because the federal judges up there are much more favorable to something like this. So what happens, the ACLU will look for judicial areas or judges they think are favorable to their view, and then they'll go recruit plaintiffs in those areas and say, hey, will you go against the school district? And so that speaks to the judicial philosophy, because the court made it really clear in 3 Supreme Court cases, one in 2019, 2022, and then again in 2022, that what we've been doing for the last 45 years does not comport with the Constitution. So they went back to what's called a history and tradition test. If you can show us this has been part of our traditional history for years, and 10 Commandments started in 1690 in public schools, went all the way to 1980, so you're talking 290 years essentially. If you can show us that it has history, we're going to assume it's constitutional. And that's where several judges in Texas would be, is look, 10 Commandments, we have it at the state capitol. The U.S. Supreme Court upheld the state capitol 10 Commandments in 2005. Governor Perry at that time argued the case, not governor then. But then you have other judges that say, no, you shouldn't have that religious expression. And so that's really what's going on in Louisiana, elsewhere. They didn't, there's tens of thousands of schools in Texas. School districts, I think, 10,000 school districts? They found a few school districts that they can sue in. And so it literally is forum shopping is what it's called. And so just understand that what's happened now is definitely not the end of the story. It's the very beginning of the story. The 3-judge panel, and all the states are in different circuits. Gene, you guys are in the 5th Circuit along with Texas. Right. Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, I think is our other. We 3 are in the 5th Circuit. And so they're the judges over all the federal judges here, and every state is in a circuit. So we've now gone from first base to second base. At second base, we lost because the 3-judge panel There's, I think, 19 judges on the Fifth Circuit, and they chose 3 at a random panel. Those 3 said, no, you can't have the 10 Commandments. So now they'll go to the full panel of 21 or of 19 and see what they think, and that's called en banc, the whole group. And so at that point, we expect to win in Texas and Louisiana both.
Yeah, and it's very interesting because one of the reasons why there's so much confusion is there are a number of Supreme Court cases out there that on, kind of on both sides of the issue, but you have the Supreme Court, basically saying, though, that this is, if you have something that has a long-standing history, a long-standing tradition, that's what counts in terms of religious content going into schools, right? Because I think that was the Marsh v. Chambers case, and they talked about that. Chief Justice Berger said, hey, the 10 Commandments have a long-standing history in the United States going back, and he demonstrated that as well. So you have cases on both sides. You also see that they're making the argument from the perspective of current case law. So what we've seen in some of the filings here in Texas is them talking about the Mahmoud v. Taylor case that came out earlier this year, as well as Kennedy v. Bremerton, and actually trying to use those cases. For those who are not familiar, Mahmoud is a case out of Rhode Island where a group of parents sued, saying, we don't want, they wanted to opt their kids out of sex education, and the school district said, no, you can't do that. And they said, well, we're going to sue you, and we're going to make this happen. And the Supreme Court ruled in the parents' favor, so you can't force this on parents. This is a parental rights issue. And now you have, the plaintiffs in Alamo Heights trying to use that case to say, okay, well, you can't force religion in the 10 Commandments. But of course, the difference with that case is the Supreme Court has been very clear that there's an element of active participation. 10 Commandment posters are passive displays. There's no active participation involved. You donate it to the school, they hang it on the wall. That's all she wrote. That's all you have to do, and there's no active participation required. And that's sort of the difference between some of the cases that they're quoting and trying to twist and use against us in these types of litigation.
And by the way, if you guys have questions, let us know. We'll pass it on to the panel. But update on Texas. Texas, at this point, more than, you mentioned the 11 districts that can't display them, where a judge said they can't go up there. But there are now 5,000 school districts in Texas displaying the 10 Commandments. There's 166,000 classrooms in which the 10 Commandments are currently displayed, and that covers about 3.2 million kids in Texas. So that's about half of the state of Texas currently has the 10 Commandments up right now as we speak in those classrooms. So that's a big step in the right direction. So Gene, for you guys where you are now, what's the next step for you? And literally, 10 Commandments is one of, Candy can speak to this as well, but Texas this year also passed laws introducing prayer back into schools and Bible reading back into schools as well. There's other things just other than 10 Commandments related to religion, morality, and restoration. So, Gene, what are you guys working on in Louisiana?
We're pulling out all the stops. Clarence Thomas, the final arbiter in any dispute is the U.S. Supreme Court. The U.S. Supreme Court has reversed itself on over 200 occasions. It's not an infallible court. So when Jonathan says legislature and the legislation belongs to whomever shows up, you need to know that's true within the court system too. And we have a conservative Fifth Circuit. We have a conservative U.S. Supreme Court. And when Clarence Thomas says, send me more, we want to take him up on that.
Yeah.
We think now's the time to restore the foundations on the question of, is this religion? And it's telling when the media shoves a microphone in your face and says, well, you're simply trying to impose religion. To which I responded to them, well, whose religion? I'm not Jewish. And we're not trying to impose the civil code or the Jewish code. I said, if it were a Christian religion, we've narrowed the 10 to 2. So it's not about that. It's about this. The word is alive and it's powerful and it's sharper than any two-edged sword. It's able to divide asunder to the thoughts and the marrow of the bone and the intents of the heart. And the left fears that. The enemy fears that. But it is our history. It is the foundation of Western civilization. And if we don't restore it to its proper place with an adequate explanation of the moral reason why. Shame on us, we have not done our job. And we're attempting to do that.
Cindy, what are some of the other issues going in Texas related to literally Texas values, religion, morality, freedom, et cetera?
I am so excited about the trends that we have as a legislature to make sure that we kind of right the boat. I'm old enough to remember when we used to have prayer in schools and a devotion in the morning, and you know what? Since we've gotten away from that, are we better off? No, we are not. Classroom teachers were leaving by the droves because of classroom management issues, and it's time for our schools to understand what worked in the past, and it's an exciting time to be alive. It's an exciting time to be in the legislature and to be part of this historical change. And thank you to Texas Values and others that have worked so tirelessly. You know, with the overturning of the Lemon Law, you know, the Stone versus Graham, the stone which is the problem that the Fifth Court of Appeals used to say that the Louisiana law couldn't go into effect in those parishes. And I'm pretty excited, frankly, about getting some of these court cases all the way to the Supreme Court and getting Stone overturned completely and restoring American schools to what our forefathers understood, and that is that the Ten Commandments, respecting others and respecting the authority of God, is a good thing for our nation, and it would be a good thing for our school kids to see on their walls. I'm excited about what we've got in store for us as a state, and man, it's been an ugly battle. For those that aren't in the trenches, I thought I would have some death threats over some other bills I carried, but this was the one that apparently triggered some folks to go out of their minds. And so I just wanted you, those that are listening, to just lift us up in prayer, lift up Louisiana and Arkansas as well as we do this battle all the way to the Supreme Court, and make sure that our nation is once again a nation that honors God, and that we fulfill that motto that we are one nation under God, and that we can not just be one nation under God on our coins and on our currency, but in our classrooms.
Gene, you guys were the first state to do this. Texas jumped on, didn't get it passed that year. Candy got it passed this year. There's now, you also have Arkansas, who's now passed the Ten Commandments law. I'm told, talk to legislators in Kentucky, they're putting up, right now, they're putting back up the Ten Commandments that the court ordered to be taken down in 1980. They're putting them back up in schools, same way they had been in 1980. There's 22 states that are now introducing bills to post the Ten Commandments. What kind of guidance would you give to those in other states moving through this process?
I think what was just mentioned, we need to pray. We need to pray for those who are going to serve as the spokespeople. Our Attorney General is going to have to argue this case. Apparently your Attorney General will as well before the U.S. Supreme Court. That's instrumental to the next step in all of this. So we surround our AG with intercessors. We meet with them on a regular basis. We pray like this really matters. It's not a question of posters. It's a question of the living word and authentic history. And are we going to get back to the foundations that made America great and what was in the hearts of our founding fathers when they came here? It's imperative that we take it seriously. For us, when you're dealing with legislation, if you simply leave it to chance or what the crowd who shows up offers, you're going to get a mishmash of ideas. For us, there's one person who's imperative and has to defend the law as it is written. And so for us, it's making certain that our Attorney General is comfortable with the language, it's located in the right area of the law, and it's not compromised. And on the bipartisan question, a lot of times you could be bipartisan on the floor of the House or the Senate, because who's going to oppose the Ten Commandments publicly? But when you get in committee, man, you better be prepared. Don't bring a knife to a gunfight, because they're going to come out with every stop. They're going to try every trick in the book, poison. Be prepared to scrub it and to keep it squeaky clean.
Candy, what would your advice be for other legislators?
Again, I think it was so imperative that I go in very, very well prepared about what our founding fathers understood and how they understood it. And so, one of the things that the left tried to use a lot was the clause in our founding documents that they indicated should be a separation, that old separation, which was of course a letter, not in any of our documents. And I was able to debate that significantly for quite a long time. But to understand that the freedom of religion is also in there, and the freedom to understand that religion is part of who we are as a nation is so foundational and important that the Establishment Clause might be in conflict with it, and that kind of shut it down in Texas. I don't know about in other states, but being able to say that, the Establishment Clause and the freedom of religion being both there together, they might be in conflict, but they're not, because our forefathers understood that you needed to have a relationship with the Lord, with God. They put it 4 times in the Declaration of Independence. They referred to God in 4 different ways in the Declaration of Independence, and that is foundational to who we are as a nation. And if we don't remember our foundation, then we've built 250 stories years on top of that foundation, and you can't shift from that foundation without destroying the building that we've built. And so it is foundational. I would just recommend that legislators in other states go back to that foundation.
Good advice. One thing, too, that I'll add with all this going on is the historical background is so much deeper than people think. Back in 2005, when at that time Abbott was the Solicitor General, he argued the case of the U.S. Supreme Court to keep the display of the 10 Commandments in front of the Texas Capitol. The court, on the day it handed down that decision, also handed down a second decision on a 10 Commandments monument that was in Kentucky, McCreary County, Kentucky. And it was local government that had the monument up. And the court inexplicably said it's okay for Texas, but it's not okay for Kentucky. And 2 decisions on the 10 Commandments monuments on the same day, 1 for, 1 against. So the court clearly is not infallible, but what's significant is, at that point, part of the arguments before the court were there have been over 300 cases where the courts have cited the 10 Commandments as the basis of our civil laws, not as the basis of our faith. Courts pointed out that our laws against election fraud are based on the 10 Commandments. One of the courts in North Dakota pointed out that our modern laws against cattle rustling are based on the 10 Commandments. They pointed out that white-collar crime laws are based on the 10. So there's literally the 10 Commandments embedded throughout civil code. If it were not a religious code at all, and the first part is, but if it was not a religious code, you still would want a society governed by the 10 Commandments. But we start, because of the Declaration, with a religious premise up top that there is a God and He has the right to tell us what to do, which is what the 10 Commandments are parallel with. So much of what the argument is, if people start arguing with you, take it back to bigger principles. Don't get into theology, and don't get into, is it a Christian or is it not Christian? And your answer is perfect. If it was a Christian, it'd be 2 commands. But it's not. This is a civil code, and that's why it's displayed in government buildings. It's easier to find the 10 Commandments in a government building than it is a church building all across America. And that's because it has had that kind of impact. So with that final perspective, Jonathan, wrap us up, sir. We've got 1 minute and 15 seconds left, so you get final word going out.
That's a lot of pressure. I think, I think one thing is to observe is that, right now we in America, the great thing about America is that we can agree to disagree on things. And the Supreme Court has been very clear in many, many cases throughout legal precedents that observance is not coercion, right? So they talk about how basically this is, if we can't put something up on the wall and take a look at it and feel like we have to either, do that thing or tear it down, or we're coerced in some way, then we've really lost the spirit of what it is to be America. We don't have that. And so, but in America, we understand, you may have a view, I have a view, we may even offend each other with those views, but that doesn't amount to coercion, and the Supreme Court was very clear about that, and I think it was the Hialeah case. And so, this is just something where we live today in an age of rage. There's a lot of people out there that they love to rage against whatever it happens to be, and to really be perpetually angry about things. But the one thing that the perpetually angry person hates is a challenge to come up and to face and have a calm and reasonable mannered debate over those things. I think that's one of the things that Charlie Kirk did so well. I think that's one of the things that we as Christians are called to do, and sit down and really talk about these things. But it is undeniable, whether you're a spiritual person or even not, that the 10 Commandments have a long-standing history in our country. You can't debate that. And I think that that's what keeps the 10 Commandments in our public sphere, and that's why we're all here today.
And guys, for you, Ken Paxton, the Attorney General, has made it really clear that all the schools in Texas are to go ahead and display that except the ones involved directly in the case. So if your school doesn't have 10 Commandments up yet, make that your personal mission. One of the websites you'll see from Texas Values is restoreamericanschools.org. You go there, you can sponsor the school, say, I want my school to have it, and 30 classrooms in a school is what we figure, and it's $1 a classroom to get the 10 Commandments up. So sponsor your school if it hadn't been sponsored yet, or take it on the website and say, hey, I'll be the one to deliver the posters, whatever. But at restoreamericanschools.org is where you can go to make sure Texas gets covered with 10 Commandments. God bless you guys.